A misogynist and a sadist of the highest order, detective has solved the most high-profile murder in the United States after 60 years. The murder of the actress, committed 72 years ago, remains one of the most high-profile unsolved cases in the United States. The former policeman is sure that he solved this case, and the perpetrator is his father, but colleagues consider his arguments nonsense. The history of a brutal murder and conspiracy theories was traced by unprecedented cruelty. The dark-haired beauty Elizabeth Short was one of many girls from the hinterland who dreamed of acting in a movie. She was born in Hyde Park, a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts, in 1924 and has adored movie magazines since childhood. At the age of 19, Short left her native home and went west in search of a better star life. Over the next few years, she attended numerous film auditions, but she was not destined to achieve the Hollywood success she so passionately dreamed of. The young actress dated different men. For a while, she was seriously in love with Major Matt Gordon of the United States Air Force. The couple announced their engagement, but the wedding never took place. Gordon died in a plane crash in 1945. After the death of her fiancé, Short lived in California, did not stay anywhere for a long time. She loved male company and attention, accepted expensive gifts and bank checks. The girl spent large sums on expensive things, preferring hunger to bad clothes. Shortly before her death, Short wrote to her former lover about her plans to move to Chicago to start a modeling career there. But even these plans were not destined to come true. The girl was last seen alive on January 9, 1947, at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. This week, the police arrested the man who, in their opinion, committed all this. How did the person who committed all these crimes manage to avoid arrest for 40 years? Warning: the material published below contains details of some of the crimes committed. On the evening of May 3, 1986, Janelle Cruz stayed at home alone. Her parents were on vacation. Taking advantage of this, an 18-year-old girl who worked in a restaurant invited a friend to visit. Later, he recalled that at least twice they noticed strange noises coming from the street and from the garage. But Cruz, who was described by her family as a kind-hearted and beautiful girl just entering adulthood, did not attach much importance to these sounds. Around midnight, her friend left. The next morning, a real estate agent who came to show the house to potential buyers found Janelle in her bedroom. The attention from the press, which generates numerous myths around the murder, attracted strange personalities. About 60 people came to the police to confess to the murder of Shorts. The investigation into the murder of Elizabeth Short has become one of the largest and longest in the history of the United States. Detectives suspected every acquaintance of the murdered woman. Several thousand people were summoned for questioning, and several hundred were included in the list of suspects. But none of them were ever convicted. With a huge staff and at the same time not having sufficient evidence, the police were unable to charge anyone, and by the spring of 1947 the case was declared a grouse. The Cruz family tried to live on, but the thought that the killer Janelle was still at large did not give them rest. "I couldn't stay home alone for 32 years, says Michelle Cruz White, Janelle Oppo's younger sister. In 1986, the family had not yet known, but their Janelle was the last known victim of the so-called Golden State Killer. He has been working for almost 10 years and has become known as one of the most terrible sadists in American history. Since the early 1970s, an unknown criminal has been attacking various parts of California, from Sacramento to Los Angeles. He was given various nicknames: the rapist of the eastern areas, the real night hunter and others. Only with the advent of DNA testing, the police realized that they were dealing with the same criminal. But even after that, it took them 2 more decades to find him. This is part of our history. Several generations of investigators have worked on this, said Sergeant Sean Hampton, District Sheriff Oppo's Office, Sacramento. Rapist of the Eastern Districts.
On July 18, 1976, a masked attacker entered the bedroom of a 23-year-old girl, who woke up to see a man hanging over her, completely naked from the waist down. He tied her hands, stuffed a nightgown into her mouth and raped her. After he left, she managed to dial 911, although her hands were still tied. She was the very first victim. Over the next 12 months, the man dubbed the rapist of the Eastern Districts attacked his victims over and over again. Sometimes the attacks occurred only a few days apart. Usually, the maniac chose one-story houses, entered them through the windows and tied the victims' hands. He blinded women with bright light and threatened them with death. The attacks have upended a quiet life in Sacramento. The townspeople began to arm themselves with pistols and baseball bats, buy guard dogs and lock doors. For the first time in their lives, the rapist of the Eastern Districts committed increasingly sadistic crimes. He took trophies from his victims, such as jewelry. Before raping a 13-year-old girl, he put plates on the back of her mother, who was in the next room, and threatened her that he would cut off her daughter's fingers if he heard the sound of falling plates. Slightly smiling face.
Steve was able to find receipts confirming that his father had purchased 10 2-kilogram bags of cement a week before the murder of Shorts. The same blood-stained bag was found at the crime scene. For the past 20 years, Steve has been trying to collect all the surviving evidence and evidence linking his father to the murder of Elizabeth Short. During this time, he has published 4 books and maintains his personal blog, in which he reveals the terrible personality of his father. His first book, Black Dahlia Avenger, The True Story, is more than 100 pages of evidence, listed in chronological order, similar to police log entries. Despite the specific format, it made the New York Times bestseller list. "He's like a pit bull," commented the author's brother, Kelly Hodel, on the release of the book. After he sinks his teeth into the prey, he won't let it go. In 2001, Steve approached Stephen Kay, who works for the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, with a request to review the evidence he had collected. He still wasn't sure if his father had committed this terrible crime. But he knew for sure that he had unearthed enough new materials to reopen the case. 6 weeks later, Stephen Kay commented on the detective's work in the following words: "Thanks to the wonderful detective work of Dr. George Hodel's brave son, the doctor's name will be covered with dishonor." He also added that if George had been alive, he would have sued the offspring. It was only after such high praise for his work that Steve began writing a book to share his story with the world. According to the detective's son, he got up every day at 5 in the morning and worked on the manuscript with incredible tenacity. After the release of the detective's first book, as if at the snap of his fingers, new evidence of his father's guilt began to emerge. Steve Lopez, a columnist for the Los Angeles Times, undertook to write a review of Hodel's book and, while working on fact-checking, came across a transcript of a wiretap at the doctor's house, installed by the police on the basis of suspicion of another murder. Most of the transcript contains nothing remarkable except one detail. On February 19, 1950, at 20.25, the detectives made notes: "A woman's scream." A woman's scream again. It should be noted that a woman's voice was not heard until this moment. Then one day he dropped a careless phrase: "Let's say I killed a black dahlia. They won't be able to prove anything. They won't be able to interrogate my secretary anymore because she's dead." The doctor had attracted the attention of the police before. In October 1949, he was accused of molesting his 14-year-old daughter Tamar. At the trial, 3 witnesses claimed that they saw George Hodel molesting his daughter, but the mother sided with her husband, so he was acquitted. Due to the fact that he was a suspect in a harassment case, a year later the police included him in a huge list of alleged killers of Elizabeth Short. The secretary mentioned in the transcript was Ruth Spaulding. She died of a drug overdose. Thanks to the data obtained as a result of listening to the doctor's house, for some time he was suspected of murdering an employee. But the police had no other evidence, and the case had to be closed. It was later established that Spaulding planned to blackmail the boss. The girl knew that he deliberately misdiagnosed patients in order to conduct additional tests and treatment. Steve Hodel talks a lot about his father's friendship with the surrealist artist Man Ray. George admired Ray's work, and two of them, Lovers and Minotaur, bear a frightening resemblance to Elizabeth's mutilated body. Steve claims that George was imitating a friend in this way. My father's insanity was directly related to his belief in surrealism. He was a nihilist, a misogynist, and a sadist of the highest order, a broken thread. For Steve, his father's case is like a thread in a sweater. You gently pull it, thinking that it is about to end, but it continues to drag on. Just as in his investigation, each new piece of evidence leads to something new, and sometimes to another crime. Steve was able to find a thread that connects his father to dozens of murders committed throughout California, and eventually began to suspect that his father was the legendary Zodiac Killer. After the release of Steve Hodel's first book, the success was overwhelming. However, after the announcement that his father may also be responsible for the crimes of the Zodiac, interest in his work began to fade. Readers decided that the detective was too carried away by his obsession. One of the officers of the Los Angeles Police Department, Brian Carr, critically commented on the investigation of the detective writer, "I don't have time to prove or disprove what this man says. I am inundated with other cases that may yet be solved." Steve has long given up trying to influence law enforcement officers. "My readers are my judges and juries." In August 2018, the detective was able to find another confirmation of his theory, a handwritten letter to the police from an informant, in which George Hodel is named as the murderer of Elizabeth Short. Steve also found a telegram from George's third wife to his former lover, which says, "Your guess about George is correct. Can you help the children and me escape from home today, if possible? I loved my father," Steve adds. "I was sure that I could prove that he had nothing to do with these crimes. I didn't succeed.